olden days, everyone was really scared of mushrooms. They didn't have seeds, they didn't have roots, they could see no leaves, so they were these mystical beings. A lot of biologists kind of regarded these things as imperfect plants. They came in all shapes and sizes and colors, and so they just disregarded them altogether. That was until the very first mycologist came along and decided, nope, they wanted to categorize them. For that, I'm very happy. And I also get it, because I am also someone that's very interested in the weird world of mushrooms. Hi, my name is Holly. If you are new to this channel, I make mushroom art with the brand Susrooms that I have created. And by mushroom art, I mean trading cards. I do deep dives on mushrooms and then turn them into a character and a trading card. I think it's a fun way to learn about all the different organisms of mushrooms in general, and I'm also just a nerd about them. If that's something that interests you, you can subscribe or join my mushroom club. But let's get into the first mycologist. Their stories are kind of crazy. In 1679, there was a man who would soon be coined as the father of mycology, and his name is Pier Antonio Micheli. Micheli was born in Florence, Italy, to a poor family, and he didn't really get any sort of education because of his birthright. In the 17th century, especially in Florence, Italy, if you just weren't born into it, you didn't have opportunities to have education. But that didn't stop him from exploring the woods and being interested in mushrooms. As a teenager, he actually taught himself Latin so that he could read books and learn more about these species. Eventually, his raw talent for investigating species caught the attention of some higher up people, some monks and aristocratic patrons. This included the Grand Duke of Tuscany. And he actually hired him to manage his botanical gardens. In the early 1700s, most of the smartest minds believed in the idea of spontaneous generation, which just means that mushrooms just appear out of nowhere because that's just what they do. There wasn't a science behind it. But Micheli thought that this idea was flawed and that there was a bigger reason for mushrooms appearing out of nowhere. He was poor, but that didn't stop him from seeking the truth. He used very primitive, low-power microscopes to study the dust coming off of mushrooms, and this would be known as spores. To prove his theory that the dust from mushrooms wasn't nothing and that mushrooms came from somewhere, he did tests where he put the dust from mushrooms on melons to see what would happen, and mushrooms would appear. And you would think that this would get a lot of praise, especially in the scientific community, but it kind of got a lot of backlash. A lot of people really didn't believe his experiments. Of course, a lot of people said, this is an illusion, it's a trick, he's a witch. Micheli never became rich. He never really became popular in his day. Of course, he is now, but he actually reached a tragic end. In 1736, he was on a mission conducting wild specimens in the mountains. But unfortunately, he contracted a lung condition. He contracted pleurisy while on his endeavors searching for new mushrooms to collect and categorize. He died just a few weeks later in January of 1737 at the age of 57. He literally gave his entire life to studying mycology, and he didn't become famous in his time. But this wasn't in spite of nothing. A lot of new mycologists came up after him. They saw his life as progress. By the mid-1800s, microscopes were actually being used a lot more frequently, and their whole idea for them being illusions was kind of getting pushed aside because it was science now, and this was appropriate for science. Mycologists everywhere were using microscopes to learn more and more about spores and mushrooms. This was a great way to classify and identify mushrooms, especially the spore prints that mushrooms leave behind. But the newly introduced Swedish mycologist, Elias Fries, flat out refused to use microscopes. Why? He thought microscopes were just a gimmick. He wanted to use his eyes to study mushrooms. Why not use everything you have, all the tools? I'm not him, I can't say anything. This is whenever he discovered a new way of classifying mushrooms. He invented the nibble and spit test, meaning that he would literally nibble on mushrooms, spit them out, and classify them based on how much they were burning his tongue. Bruh. What? Because of his massive ego to integrate new technology, he dictated this was the best way to classify mushrooms by his method. So a lot of people thought that this was the correct way to identify mushrooms, and this was his theory back in the day. But he wasn't the only mycologist, and there was other mycologists that actually used other methods, real methods, that didn't involve your tongue burning to identify mushrooms. And this would be the next mycologist. His name is Christian Hendrik Persoon. His story is a bit unusual. He was born in South Africa at the Cape of Good Hope to a Dutch mother and an immigrant father. Tragedy struck early as his mother passed away a few weeks after he was born. When he was only 13, his father shipped him off to Europe alone for education, and his father ended up dying a few weeks after this incident. Why would you send your 13-year-old? I don't know, man. That's different times, I guess. Persoon never returned to South Africa. He would spend the next 34 years living as a ghost. He rented a freezing cold apartment in one of the poorest places in Paris. His only desire in life was drying and classifying mushrooms. He had one very large accomplishment in his life. In 1801, he published the masterpiece, Synopsis Methodica Fundorium. It was a momentous achievement for him, and for the next 20 years, this would be the book that everyone used to classify mushrooms. But then, enter his rival, the young, ambitious Swedish mycologist Fries.
Hello there.
Fries didn't want to build on top of Persoon's work at all. He wanted to erase it and create his own system. And because of their differences in education and universities and upbringings, they developed different people that agreed with one version versus the other. You were either Team Fries or Team Persoon. Fries published his own rival taxonomy system titled Systema Mycologium in the 1820s. So because of these two different books, they had a lot of differing systems for classifying mushrooms, so that's why the public was really at odds for which system was correct. But one isn't necessarily better than the other, in my opinion. I think that everyone learns the world in their own different ways. They were both wanting to understand species, they both had an interest in mushrooms, and honestly I think they really could have been great teammates. But alas, everyone wants the title King Mycologist, and so that's how history is, I guess. Pier Micheli died in the wilderness holding a basket of mushrooms, wanting to learn more about them. He was completely unaware that his name would live on in history books and mycology all around. He never got rich, he never got famous, but he still lives on. He decided that mushrooms didn't come from nothing, they came from somewhere, and he wanted to learn more about them. And it was because of his innovation and his curiosity that now we learn more about mycology. For thousands of years, mushrooms were treated as outcasts and random weird species, imperfect plants. And now we know them as mushrooms, fungi, and we know all the different types, which is my special interest. For me, I love learning about mushrooms because of how different they all are. Purple mushrooms, brown mushrooms, white mushrooms, toxic mushrooms, edible mushrooms, I think they're all really cool. I think just my perspective on the diversity of all of them is probably what contributed to these first mycologists being interested to begin with. They wanted to test the systems, they wanted to be the founders. Maybe they didn't know they were going to be the founders, but they wanted to learn more, and honestly that's my goal as well. So if you liked this video learning about the first mycologists, you can like and subscribe this video. I make videos every single week about mushrooms. Leave me a comment below if you would have tasted a mushroom, a wild mushroom in the 1700s to classify it, because I don't know if I would. I don't know. From what I know about mushrooms now, it does seem risky, but you know, leave me your comment what you guys think. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see y'all in the next video. Bye. Systema Mycology. Why are these names? I guess Latin. Okay, it's Latin.